In the wake of the extraordinary Operation Spider's Web attack on Russian air bases, as well as the recent bombing of the Crimean Bridge, Ukraine just launched one of its biggest offensives yet, wiping out Russian oil depots, weapon plants and more. It's a further sign of Ukraine's growing power and influence in the war, and yet another disaster for the Russian President Vladimir Putin to deal with. Here's a closer look at what occurred. In the early hours of June 6, Ukrainian forces launched drone strikes on numerous targets in occupied territory and deep within Russia itself. The drone successfully struck the Kristall oil depot in the Russian city of Engels, situated in the Saratov Oblast, approximately 370 miles from Ukraine. This was not the first time that Ukraine targeted this particular oil depot. It struck it twice earlier in the year, first on January 8, with drones wiping out 3 fuel tanks, each capable of storing millions of gallons of fuel, and damaging 6 others. Less than a week later, on January 14, while the fires from the previous attack were still burning, Ukraine doubled down and struck the depot again. However, in the months since that point, this site has been quiet. Until now. The latest drone attack was a big one, with Engels residents reporting at least 10 explosions in the area, before seeing a large fire break out at the oil depot. Video footage was soon shared online, primarily via the Telegram channel for the independent Russian news outlet Astra. In the videos, air raid sirens are heard ringing out, while raging flames and thick black plumes of smoke rise above the oil depot. Upon closer inspection of the footage, it appears that at least 3 fuel tanks are ablaze, though the full extent of the damage done is not yet known. But the Ukrainian Defense Forces have claimed full responsibility for the attack. In a post on Telegram, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine wrote, "The Ukrainian Defense Forces have struck a preemptive strike on the eve of the massive enemy shelling. Enemy airfields and other important military facilities were hit. On the night of June 6, a successful strike was carried out on the Engels airfield in the Saratov region, a place of concentration of enemy aircraft remaining after the operation of the Security Service of Ukraine." The statement later added further details on the attack. In the Saratov region, numerous hits have been confirmed in at least 3 tanks with fuel and lubricants, with subsequent ignition and a large-scale fire at the facility. The occupants' emergency services were unable to localize the fire. Significant smoke is observed. Dozens of explosions were recorded in the area of the targets. The results of the damage are being clarified. Over on the Russian side, meanwhile, the public statement given by the region's governor, Roman Busargin, was notably vague. The governor simply stated that a fire had broken out at one of the industrial enterprises in Engels, but refused to provide further details. Here's why this depot represents such an important target for Ukraine. The Kristall oil depot directly supplies fuel to the nearby Engels 2 airbase. That's where Russia stores multiple strategic bombers, including 2 95s, 2 22s and 2 160s. It uses those very bombers to repeatedly launch cruise missile attacks on Ukrainian cities like Kyiv. By targeting sites like this and wiping out fuel supplies and infrastructure, Ukraine can deal crippling critical blows to the Russian war machine. Ukraine knows it doesn't have the manpower to match Russia. It has between 500,000 and 1 million active duty soldiers compared to the more than 1.3 million on the Russian side. Ukraine can't match Russia in other areas either. Russia has more than 10 times as many aircraft, with around 3,677 units compared to Ukraine's 261, as well as a much larger naval force and far greater numbers of tanks and armoured vehicles, with around 5,750 tanks and more than 130,000 armoured vehicles for Russia, going up against an estimated 1,100 tanks and 18,920 armoured vehicles on the Ukrainian side. But despite the significant disparity between the two armies, Ukraine has repeatedly proven to be more than a match for Russia, thanks to smart strategic maneuvers like this one. Recent weeks and months have seen the Ukrainian forces repeatedly strike at key logistic and military sites in occupied regions and in Russia itself, and each one causes costly losses, delays, and chaos on the Russian side. And it's not just in Engels that Russia is reeling from the impact of Ukrainian drones today. The Ukrainian forces also struck several other important targets, including an important Russian military factory, the Progress plant in the town of Michurinsk in the Tambov Oblast. According to early information from the scene, only a single drone managed to strike the plant. Unconfirmed reports suggest that was more than enough to deal significant damage, with casualties, fires, and even a roof collapse in the plant's central workshop. A Russian news statement about the attack, shared on the Astra channel, stated, "At approximately 2:15 a.m, a drone struck a workshop at the Progress plant. Emergency services are working at the scene. There are casualties. Traffic in the area is partially blocked. Firefighters are fighting the fire." Video footage and images of the scene have been shared online and appear to verify these claims, as smoke and fires can be seen rising into the night sky above the factory. Just like the Engels oil depot, the Progress plant is not a new target for Ukraine. Its armed forces also struck this Russian factory back in December of 2024. At the time, Astra reported that residents in the area had seen strikes and damage to the plant. And once more, it's easy to see why Ukraine would want to target a factory like this. The Progress factory is a vital cog in the Russian military machine. It specializes in the production of high-tech equipment for military aviation technology and missile control systems. Its products help power the various aircraft, missile launchers, and helicopters that Russia uses day in and day out to strike Ukraine. The plant also produces goods for civilian use, like electrical products, as well as equipment for gas and oil pipelines. In short, it's a very important and valuable location for Russia, and one that the country will not want to see damaged or disrupted in any way. This is especially true at the moment, as recent reports suggest that Russia is rapidly running out of military equipment and needs to ramp up production as much as it possibly can to maintain pace with its war effort. According to experts, the country has lost thousands of tanks and armored vehicles throughout the war so far. Russia has also seen huge declines in its numbers of howitzers and self-propelled artillery systems. In fact, some sources suggest that in 2024 alone, the country lost around 3,000 tanks, close to 9,000 infantry fighting vehicles, more than 13,000 artillery systems, and over 400 air defense systems too. It also loses numerous drones almost daily, as it launches wave after wave of drone attacks on Ukraine, but many are shot down or taken out via electronic warfare before they even get close to their targets. All of those losses add up, and every piece of hardware Russia loses represents another small victory for Ukraine and a costly defeat for its enemy. And to make matters worse for Russia, a large part of the equipment it's relied on during the war so far was relatively old Soviet hardware, dragged out of long-term storage facilities. Indeed, a report from the Royal United Services Institute and International Institute for Strategic Studies estimates that around 85% of Russian tanks and armored vehicles used in the invasion so far are all from those Soviet stocks. And those stocks are gradually being depleted, putting more pressure on Russia to produce new hardware quickly and efficiently. To do that, it needs plants like Progress to be fully operational, running around the clock to churn out new pieces of military hardware. As it stands, Russia's current rate of production appears to be nowhere near sufficient. As Nikolai Michurinsk, a researcher with Germany's Bremen University, puts it, armored vehicles are being put out of use at a horrifying speed. The production of new ones and the restoration of damaged or mothballed ones is far behind the losses. Michurinsk also believes that Russia's supply of armored vehicles will only last mere months if the existing rates of losses persist, and the country isn't able to streamline and speed up its production rates. And successful Ukrainian attacks on targets like the Progress plant certainly aren't going to help with that. The damage done on June 6 probably won't put the plant out of action altogether. However, it will take time and resources for the Russians to put out the fires, clean up the debris, fix or replace any broken bits of machinery, and bring the plant back to full-scale operations. And there's no guarantee for the Russians that Ukraine doesn't have further strikes planned, which could do even more damage next time. Ukraine's June 6 attacks even made it close to the Russian capital of Moscow. Again, according to reports from Astra, shared on the organization's Telegram channel, readers reported explosions in the Fominsk area, which is a town in the Moscow Oblast, around 40 miles southwest of the capital itself. Few details have emerged around what exactly happened in the area, but Russia clearly felt threatened as it temporarily shut down two of the major Moscow airports, Domodedovo and Sukovsky, claiming that this was done to ensure civilian flight safety. The airports have since reopened, but these locations and other airports across Russia have been forced to temporarily suspend operations in recent weeks and months due to the increasing threat and prevalence of Ukrainian drone strikes on the country. The mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, also issued a statement, shedding further light on what occurred. Though one can never entirely rely on Russian sources to speak the full truth, Sobyanin stated, "The Defense Ministry's air defense forces destroyed 6 drones flying toward Moscow. Emergency services are working at the site of the debris fall." He later issued a second statement, suggesting that another wave of Ukrainian drones had targeted the area. The Defense Ministry's air defense forces destroyed 3 more drones flying toward the Moscow region. Emergency services specialists are working at the site of the wreckage. The extent of the damage is unclear, but the very fact that Ukraine is able to pilot drones so far over the border and so close to the Russian capital clearly represents an important achievement for the country. Its own capital city, Kyiv, is under near constant bombardment from the Russian army, with regular and repeated drone and missile strikes bringing down buildings, wiping out historical landmarks, and causing both soldier and civilian casualties. If Ukraine was eventually able to strike back successfully at Moscow itself, that would undoubtedly raise morale across the nation and send serious shockwaves across the Kremlin. More Ukrainian drone activity was also reported southeast of Moscow in the Ryazan Oblast. It's believed that Ukraine was targeting the Dyagilevo airbase, situated in the Dyagilevo district. Footage from the scene, filmed by local residents, shows clouds of black smoke reportedly caused by a drone attack in the area. Not far away, a separate fire also broke out near the village of Podvyaze, though specific attribution to a Ukrainian drone strike remains unconfirmed for now. Ukraine's armed forces confirmed responsibilities for these attacks as well. In the original, lengthy statement issued on the General Staff of the Armed Forces Telegram channel, it wrote, "The Dyagilevo airfield in the Ryazan region, where air tankers and escort fighters are based, which are used to provide missile strikes on the territory of Ukraine, was also hit. In addition, enemy strategic bombers are taking off from Dyagilevo." Again, this ties into the recurring trend seen in Ukraine's military tactics in recent weeks. The country is focusing its efforts on weakening Russia from within, striking at air bases, airfields, depots, factories, storage facilities, and so on, hoping to deal crushing blows to Russian logistics and military hardware, rather than resorting to strikes on civilian infrastructure as Russia has repeatedly done in Ukraine. While the extent of the damage is once more unclear, the evidence shows that fires did break out in the area and may very well have caused some serious problems for the Russians to fix. And even more of those problems also emerged in 3 other Russian oblasts, Tula, Kaluga and Bryansk, which are both situated reasonably close to the Ukrainian border. In Tula, according to a statement from the oblast governor, Dmitry Milayev, the area's air defense systems brought down a pair of drones and 3 people were injured. In Kaluga, the oblast governor, Vladislav Shapsha, reported 5 drones being shot down close to the border between Obninsk and Borovsky. One of the fallen drones landed on a road, damaging multiple vehicles, but allegedly causing no injuries to any civilian passengers. Lastly, in Bryansk, images and videos taken by people at the scene showed multiple explosions near the area's airport. According to initial reports, it sounded as though a surface-to-air missile had blown up in the area, though this has not been confirmed. Russian military bloggers have also surmised that Ukraine's forces may have been targeting an Iskander short-range ballistic missile system, which was said to be stationed at an airfield in the area. And the bad news doesn't end there for Russia. Air raid sirens have also been ringing out across the occupied and annexed Crimean Peninsula, with at least 1 reported missile strike in the area. Explosions were heard in multiple locations, including the touristic coastal city of Feodosia and the settlement of Ryazan. This comes in the wake of a recent Ukraine Armed Forces attack on the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to the Russian mainland. Ukraine has regarded the bridge, which sees it as an illegal structure and a symbol of Russian oppression and aggression, as a primary target since the early stages of the invasion. It's launched multiple attacks on the structure, which runs for 12 miles in total, putting it partly out of action on several occasions. The latest strike involved underwater explosives planted on the structural supports of the bridge and detonated in the early hours of June 3rd. This, once again, put the bridge out of operation for a brief period, though Russia has since reported that it's fully functional once again. The final known target of Ukraine's June 6 barrage was in Belgorod, one of the major Russian cities situated very close to the Ukrainian border, and the site of much conflict throughout the war so far. There, a Russian locomotive reportedly derailed due to an explosive device under the tracks. Russian officials suspect Ukrainian involvement. A statement was issued by the Belgorod Oblast governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, detailing the incident. A reserve diesel locomotive derailed in the Prokhorovsky district. According to preliminary information, it was caused by an explosive device placed under the rails. There were no casualties. Train traffic was delayed for 2.5 hours. But now all trains are running on schedule. Part of the track was damaged. The repair crew has begun to restore the damaged section of the track. Ukraine's armed forces have not thus far claimed responsibility for this particular attack, nor was it mentioned in the statement shared by the General Staff account on Telegram. However, that statement did make one thing clear. Strikes on military infrastructure will continue until the complete cessation of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. In short, Ukraine is not going to stop, it will not rest, and it will not allow Russia to continue getting away with its ruthless attacks on the Ukrainian people and cities without retaliation. It has the power and the authority, with NATO allies recently agreeing to allow Ukraine to use Western weapons on Russian soil, to strike back, and it will continue to do so until this war is over. Because of this, Russia can no longer concentrate all of its efforts and energies purely on offensive maneuvers. It's now being forced more onto the back foot, having to think about possible attacks on its refineries, factories, and airfields, as well as having to invest time and energy into defending those key areas. And as Ukraine's recent Operation Spider's Web proved, no target is off limits, and nowhere in Russia is truly safe. In that attack, Ukraine successfully managed to smuggle dozens of drones deep within Russian territory. Those drones were stashed away in trucks, hidden beneath retractable roofs. Once the trucks were in position near multiple air bases in Russia, including the Belaya Air Base, which is over 2,500 miles away from Ukraine, the retractable roofs opened up, the drones took to the skies, and fire rained down on Russian planes and equipment. Reports suggest that around $7 billion worth of damage was done in that single attack, which had been planned for over 18 months, according to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and representatives of the Ukrainian Security Service, or SBU. It was a massive success for so many reasons, and with these subsequent attacks following up, Ukraine is clearly gaining valuable momentum at a critical time in the war. Recent attempts at peace talks and ceasefires have proven unsuccessful, with Putin demanding that Ukraine agree to terms that favor Russia. He clearly believes that he can strong-arm the country into bowing to his demands so that his Ukraine invasion appears to be a big success and his legacy remains relatively untarnished in the eyes of the Russian people and the oligarchs who helped to keep him in power. But no matter how Putin tries to spin things, the cold hard realities of this war are clear to see. More than 250,000 Russian soldiers have lost their lives in the war so far. Hundreds of thousands more have been injured, and Russia is soon set to pass the unwanted and ugly milestone of more than 1 million casualties, with around 1,000 new deaths or injuries each and every day. On the ground, Russia is gaining ground at a snail's pace, losing vast amounts of equipment, facing growing reports of plummeting morale within its ranks, and dealing with an economy under significant strain. And with Ukraine more willing and able than ever to strike back, the tide of the war is almost definitely starting to shift, and Putin may soon find that it's he, not Zelensky, who will need to accept some undesirable peace talk terms, or face even more ruin and devastation across the length and breadth of his nation. Now, for more information on Russia's recent turmoil, take a look at our video detailing the country's worst week of the war so far, or check out our in-depth breakdown of how Ukraine planned and executed the incredible Operation Spider's Web attack. And remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more reliable and detailed information about Russia's war on Ukraine and other important conflicts around the globe.